Decían que los hombres son malvados y que no pueden hablar de feminismo. Quisieron reírse de los hombres, y fue entonces cuando el hombre de cabello amarillo terminó convirtiéndolas en el chiste. Mira el video completo y dime qué opinas de la comediante que, a pesar de ser comediante, termina ofendiéndose por todo.
There's a greater stigma on males than there would be on females. Certainly, if you see that if a woman did exactly the same thing as Jeremy Clarkson said, no one would say that. Is there a problem with women today or so on? So it's kind of tough. They would view it as very sexist. So the fact that we were okay to bring up Jeremy Clarkson's gender in this shows the problem that there is an issue of stigma attached to men. Whenever we do something, it will be reflected in the media as part of our gender.
I'm sorry, speaking as a woman who does stand-up comedy, anytime I do a show and something isn't perfect about this show, somebody starts talking about women in comedy. The idea that women are not stigmatised by the actions of individuals within their number is a complete myth. It's just not
to some degree as men. My point was to the same degree
than men. We talk about women in politics and the way they dress. We don't talk about men in politics and the way they dress. The idea that men are specially stigmatised, I'm sorry, but that's a ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous.
The truth is there's
it's offensive to say it's ridiculous because once again it's just all dismissed. Now I'm a committee member of the Being a Man Festival at the South Bank Centre, where we are trying to give men an opportunity to be able to talk about things that matter. The biggest of men under 45 in the UK. Now, what's happening? Why is this going on? Right? And I'll tell you why.
But to say,
listen,
but Martin, to
can I
suggest
talk?
that these...
Let Martin talk.
What's happening is that the Campaign Against Living Miserably, the charity that represents this, is desperate for more funds to look into why this is going on. But they're not getting it. And I'll tell you why, because men don't qualify as a minority interest, and we don't get preferential funding. Right? You can bet your life if women sort of, you know, or Muslims did, or black guys, you know, there would be, you know, front page news, guaranteed government inquiry, millions of pounds of funds. But white men have...
Wait a minute, Sally Peck. Let's bring Sally Peck here. I mean, a lot of women... Domestic violence, you know, this disproportionately, many more. Let Sally speak.
There's a huge problem in this country with gender equality. I mean, as you've seen recently in the global gender gap, we've fallen to 26th place in the world, which is really embarrassing. We used to be 9th place 10 years ago. But the real problem, yes, men have a much higher rate, and that's because we tell children when they're 1 year old that boys and girls are different. And this causes boys to grow up without any emotional intelligence. People think, oh yeah, we need gender equality because this will get girls into STEM subjects, which is true. But even more important than that, we need gender equality so that boys won't be violent. There's a wonderful charity based in Edinburgh called Zero Tolerance, which is teaching gender equality to childminders so that they can teach children that they're equal, they have equal opportunities, and they do it specifically to reduce violence from men to women when they're adults. We need to start much earlier than men.
Okay, Milo, you want to come in?
Unbelievable, astonishing sexism. We have to teach young boys not to be boys so they won't be violent.
Why is being violent being...
Get out! I'm sorry. We teach boys and girls that they're the same, and that's a problem. They are different. When we do experiments on young babies and even on related animals, we know that certain children go for certain toys. Boys and girls are different. To give you some context for all of this, you have to understand a little bit about the history of feminism. There have been two main strands.
And here is our local expert.
Yes. Of course, because of course men aren't allowed to speak about anything that isn't to do with men.
The things
except
that you've
no one's
already
really
said.
interested in
The things that you've already said indicate that you know nothing about
all right,
it.
well,
so,
I'm
so
going
you've already
I'm going to talk to you a little. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the problems that men are experiencing in society. And since you're not a man, perhaps you could like to give it a rest for a second. So there is a wider context in which men are suffering slightly. Even 10 years ago it would have been ridiculous to say it, but very recently, we've seen a lot of structural advantages to being a woman crop up in education, in the workplace. Under 30, women earn more than men for the same work in the UK and the US now, which is an extraordinary statistic, something that people have to be very, very carefully convinced of, because it sounds absurd. But there is a sense in which men, particularly young men, probably men our age, haven't necessarily experienced it, but younger men, 20-year-olds, there's an enormous problem. I read about this last year. I call it the sexiness of men checking out of society, checking out of relationships, giving up on women, giving up on careers. They don't bother to go to university anymore. Now more women go to university, women get higher grades at university, more women graduate from university. Yeah. All of the traditional imbalances between men and women have flipped, and very recently.
No, that's
and when
incorrect,
young
because
men,
when you go
may I be allowed
further
to
in the
finish?
business,
So I'm talking about men, darling. When
And he's called her darling, incredibly rude, and now you think it's funny. Well, this is exactly the problem. This is institutionalised sexism, and you're just sitting here doing it flagrantly and without even apologising.
We just heard that it was an essential characteristic of men that they were violent a minute ago. So
No,
I guess
we did not. Nobody said that.
Afirmar que la violencia es inherente al hombre no solo es una generalización inexacta, sino también profundamente injusta. La violencia no es un rasgo biológico exclusivo de los hombres. Es un comportamiento influenciado por factores sociales, culturales y ambientales. Reducir a los hombres a una caricatura de seres violentos por naturaleza no solo ignora la complejidad humana, sino que también perpetúa estereotipos dañinos que afectan a todos. Lo irónico es que, mientras el feminismo acusa a los hombres de sexismo por generalizaciones basadas en género, algunas corrientes feministas caen en el mismo error al afirmar que los hombres son inherentemente violentos. Esto no solo es hipócrita, sino que también socava la credibilidad de un movimiento que busca la igualdad. ¿Cómo se puede luchar contra el sexismo mientras se promueven estereotipos igualmente dañinos sobre la mitad de la población? Además, esta narrativa ignora que la violencia no es exclusiva de ningún género. Las mujeres también pueden ser agresivas, aunque a menudo se exprese de maneras diferentes, debido a condicionamientos sociales. Al centrarse únicamente en los hombres como perpetradores de violencia, se invisibiliza a las víctimas masculinas, y se refuerza la idea de que las mujeres son siempre inocentes o pasivas, lo que es igualmente limitante y falso. Por último, afirmar que la violencia es inherente al hombre desresponsabiliza a quienes actúan de manera agresiva. Si aceptamos que los hombres son así por naturaleza, estamos justificando comportamientos destructivos, en lugar de fomentar la responsabilidad personal y el autocontrol. Esto no solo es injusto, sino que también impide que se busquen soluciones reales a problemas como el abuso doméstico, la delincuencia y otras formas de violencia. ¿Y tú, qué opinas? Déjamelo saber en los comentarios. Con esto finaliza el video. Si te gustó, no olvides darle like, comentar y compartir. Y si disfrutas este tipo de contenido, suscríbete a mi canal. Tengo más videos que podrían interesarte. Gracias por tu apoyo. Nos vemos en el próximo video.